In 2018, Insomniac Games released one of the best Spider-Man games in the past decade, blowing fans away with its action-packed gameplay and its endearing story. I remember picking it up for the first time and playing for a couple hours, and I instantly knew that this game was gonna be something huge. Now, growing up, you can say that I was one of the biggest Spider-Man fans. I remember watching the Sam Raimi films and thinking Spider-Man was one of the best superheroes ever. So experiencing Spider-Man PS4 for the first time is something I wish I could just do all over again. But with the release of Miles Morales, I potentially had an opportunity to do exactly that, but this time with some extras thrown in there. If you guys seen some of my past videos, you would know the concerns I have with this game. The main concern is the similarity. Given the fact that the game takes place in the same city, there's not much they could add. Also, one of my concerns was that the combat would be a little bit too similar to Spider-Man PS4. I put in 40 hours into Spider-Man PS4, it's literally the only platinum trophy I have, so the combat did get a little bit tiring for me. So I wasn't that eager to experience the same exact thing again. But after beating Miles Morales, has my opinion changed? Is the game even better than Spider-Man PS4? Well, my name is Quasi, and today, let's talk about Spider-Man Miles Morales. Okay, so the game loves to hit you with plot twists and story reveals. So with that being said, I will keep this section of the video spoiler free and try to use gameplay from the earlier stages of the story. So if you played Spider-Man PS4, you should kind of get a gist of where the story is going. Miles Morales follows a kid named Miles, of course, as he trains with Peter to potentially become the next Spider-Man. Peter decides to go on a little vacation with Mary Jane, leaving Miles in New York for 2 weeks. But the minute Peter leaves, things start to go rampant in the city, and a group by the name of the Underground starts wreaking havoc around the city. The group seems to be after a device called the New Form, which has the potential to wipe out the entire city. So it's up to Miles to investigate the group and put a stop to their plans. The story, although simple, is pretty damn entertaining to watch it unfold. The thing that makes the game different is that with Spider-Man PS4, that story starts with an assumption that you already know who Peter Parker was. So we don't really see Peter develop as Spider-Man because he's already done that. But here we see Miles grow, we see him adapt to his new powers, and we even see him gain some new powers with his electricity. Miles does do some questionable things in the story, but you kind of let it slide because at the end of the day, he's still a kid. But of course his actions do have consequences, but I love how he learns from it and progresses as a person. There are really endearing moments between Miles and some of the side characters that I just love. Also, the game is hella cinematic. Honestly, you can compile all the cutscenes into one video and it'll be an interesting movie to watch. And there also were some scenes in the game that really got me hyped. The camera work, the graphics, the choreography worked so well to give the players a really good experience. The only downside about the whole thing is the pacing. Unfortunately, unlike the original, this game is really short, and because of that, it suffers from some really noticeable pacing issues. I felt like the game was speedrunning itself, but of course, if you stop and do little things within the story, like the side quests, the collectibles, it would increase your playtime. But when I reached the point where the game says, "Are you sure you want to continue?" I was like, damn, the game's over already? And this segues to the main topic. The game kind of feels underwhelming. So before we get any further, I'd like to talk about the gameplay. So if you played Spider-Man PS4, then the gameplay here should feel strikingly similar. This is a problem I initially had when the game was first announced, and unfortunately, I was right, the gameplay is very similar. Miles and Peter's combos feel almost identical, which is a shame because I figured since Peter has more experience, maybe Miles' combos will be a little slower or something. Also, they took out the ultimate finishers, which really sucked because I thought those were the best thing about the PS4 version. The finishers made it fun to go look for suits because each suit has its own finisher. However, with Miles Morales, each suit has its own passive ability, which can be useful in battle but doesn't really make much of a difference. Also, the spider gadgets make a return, however in this game, there's oddly less of them, and to be honest, they're not even better than the original. Which is very disappointing because I remember how crutch the gadgets were in the PS4 version. Some of the fights would be determined by how well you utilize your gadgets, but here I literally barely use any of the gadgets. I mostly stuck to the hologram one, but other than that, I opted not to use them at all. One thing I can say is that I love the Venom powers because it gives you more of a freestyle form when it comes to the fighting. My favorite move being the Venom uppercut. This launches all the enemies in range into the air, giving you time to do a bunch of air combos. The one thing about this game is that you want to stay in the air as much as possible to give you more of a control when you're being surrounded by a bunch of enemies. Also, stealth makes a return, and there's not really much to talk about because it's pretty much exactly the same as the previous game. You sneak up on an enemy, press square to stick them on the wall, press triangle to do a takedown. So in conclusion, the gameplay is damn near identical, nothing new to write home about, and it really felt underwhelming. But that doesn't matter. Just like the first game, the combat here is really addicting. I always found myself stopping what I'm doing and just go to a crime scene and just get into the action. The gameplay is so similar that literally the minute I started the game, I was instantly doing all the maneuvers I did in the old game. The familiarity made my playthrough so much smoother, and once I got used to the Venom powers, it just made the game a whole lot of fun. So far, the gameplay and the mechanics are really similar to Spider-Man PS4, but how does the world come together? Okay, so the world is damn near the same. There are some new landmarks and locations, but overall, it's pretty much the same. The big difference is the graphics, and this game looks amazing. Now, I need to point out, I'm playing on PlayStation 5, so it might look different on the last gen consoles. So there's essentially two options you can go with, fidelity mode and performance mode. Fidelity locks the frame rate at 30 frames, but it also adds ray tracing and overall makes the game look good. Performance mode adds 60 frames, but doesn't utilize ray tracing, so it feels good. I initially went with fidelity mode for the first hour of my gameplay, but I switched it up to performance mode and the difference was night and day. Personally, I could care less about ray tracing, but seeing 60 frames on a console was mind-blowing. You see, I've never been a PC gamer, so I've used 30 frames per second for like majority of all my games. So seeing it firsthand and how well it works is something that made playing this game a little more refreshing. And there's also quite a lot to do in the world, although similar to the original game, there's like extra 4 to 5 hours of endgame content. And with that aside, there were a few problems with the game, so let's just jump straight into the cons. So off rip, I noticed something. A lot of the issues that plagued the previous game is here as well. One of the biggest problems is the fact that in certain situations, you're required to clear out an entire room full of enemies. However, sometimes the last enemy you might need to clear out might literally be stuck inside a wall, resulting in you having to restart the entire mission from scratch. This was a huge problem in the original because it happened to me more than once, but here it's a little more annoying given how long some of these sections are. This also might be a personal issue, but I feel like the game doesn't give you a sense of direction when it comes to solving some of its puzzles. I remember in early game, there was a section where you had to maneuver trains in a certain way, and I was literally stumbling for hours trying to figure out what I had to do until I finally figured it out. Of course, this is just a little gripe I have, nothing too serious. There were also issues that prevented gameplay. For example, there was a weird scene where I was talking to one of these NPCs, and once the conversation was over, there was like an invisible wall that wouldn't allow me to move. Really weird stuff like that. And lastly, like I mentioned, the pacing of the story was kind of all over the place. The start of the game was pretty decent. It tried to introduce new characters and reintroduce old characters. But there was a certain point in the game where the game kind of felt like it was speedrunning, and some of the plot conclusions kind of felt rushed. So all in all, there wasn't too much I didn't like about the game, so it's really hard to like pick out little cons, but majority of them was just gameplay issues. So of course, if you enjoyed Spider-Man PS4, then you're probably gonna like this game. So with that being said, let's wrap things up. All in all, I'll say that this is a great addition to the Spider-Man universe. Of course, given my love for the first game, I was gonna of course love this one. However, I'll admit it, this game was kind of underwhelming, given all the hype I had for the game originally. I kind of wish the game had more to offer, and more importantly, more to build off of. I feel like there was so much potential that was wasted here. If they let us play as other characters throughout the story, I feel like that would make the game feel a little more new and refreshing. Although given how well the game did, I think we can expect some DLC down the line, but we're just gonna have to wait and see. This game isn't a sequel, but more of an expansion of the original. Given the length, there isn't too much you're gonna miss out here. Yes, it's underwhelming, but I still think the game is damn near flawless. Even though the combat is literally damn near the same as the original, it still has that charm that makes you come back to it. I honestly fairly enjoyed the game, and the ending, although bittersweet, put a big smile on my face. I love Miles' character, and although he has some flaws, I still feel like he's a natural character. So if you're having second thoughts on whether or not to get this game, let me sum it up like this. If you love the first game, you're gonna love this one. So this video was way long overdue, and I finally got the chance to do it. I actually beat this game like weeks ago, so I had the gameplay just sitting on my Elgato, so I finally got together, wrote the script, and got the video out. But of course, if you enjoyed the video, make sure you hit that like button, and if you're new here, make sure you subscribe. I think we just hit 60 subscribers, which is crazy because I think I was at 40 like a couple weeks ago. So I like the way the channel is growing. So if you like what I do, like I said before, hit the subscribe button. My name is Quasi, and this was just a game.